Welcome, New Life Groups. Ken Riley here with my great friend
Jenny Waldron. Good to see you guys.
Oh, glad to be here.
Every
Jenny.
week we get together and just kind of talk about the text that we're studying on the weekend so that groups just feel like we're kind of all in one big conversation together. I think it's super fun. So thanks for being here today, Ken.
Oh, glad to be here. It's a lot
So
of
fun. Hey, this is actually the last week. If you're in group right now, it's either 7 or fewer days until Easter.
Already.
It's going to be so much fun. There's all of this great celebration that goes into Easter. We get to celebrate that Jesus rose from the dead and that we actually get to have new life too. And so it's just an amazing weekend for us to celebrate together. It's actually really fun for kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are a ton of egg events around the peninsula that kids can be involved in. And if you're like one of those parents that's like, give me all of them, I just want to take my kid to all of them, you can find all of the New Life egg events at newlife.tv/Easter.
So cool.
And so there's like a glow-in-the-dark Easter egg hunt at the training center.
Yeah.
There is something to do with a hot air balloon in Port Orchard. And there's like hop drops and community egg dashes.
Yeah.
And it's all over the place. So check that out. Figure out which one you want to do. That's
So
really,
much
really fun.
So awesome.
So today we're in Matthew chapters 26 and 27.
Yeah.
And we're nearing the end of this series. We only have 2 more weeks, this week and next week. We're nearing the end of the story, and we're nearing the end of Jesus' physical life on earth in the narrative that we're studying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in Holy Week, we're now on Thursday. And so we're getting from Thursday to Friday. There's this whole conversation going on between what is Jesus doing with his disciples, what's happening with the religious leaders. There's a whole plot to have Jesus killed that's having conversations had around that. And so we, in 26, we actually don't have time on a weekend to study everything that's in here because there is so much drama that goes on. So Ken, could you just maybe walk us through one of the big things that we didn't get to talk about this weekend, but is so central to Jesus's preparation for the cross is the Last Supper?
Oh, the Last Supper, a very integral moment in Matthew chapter 26, Jenny, where Jesus has kind of this meal with his disciples. And, you know, the conversation turns to what I would call very awkward when Jesus frankly says, one of you are going to betray me. And the disciples, I just have imagine being around that table and the disciples are saying, is it me, Lord? Is it me, Lord? Is it me? And then we see in the text as Judas kind of speaks up and says, is it me? And Jesus says, you have said it. And Judas gets kind of called out in that moment as the one that would betray Jesus. And then after that, he begins to take some bread and a cup and some wine, and they have this meal, this Last Supper, the Lord's table, also known as communion, and something that our church celebrates, you know, typically on the first Sunday of each month, where you have bread and you have a cup, modeling what Jesus did. And we do that, Jenny, I think, as a reminder of this mission that Jesus was on to reconcile creation back to God and the work of the cross. And so he has bread and he has a cup. And he says, this is my body, which was given for you. Eat in remembrance of me. And then this was my blood. It represents the forgiveness of sin, this new covenant. Take and drink and do this in remembrance of me. And so one of the things that I've been reflecting on, and possibly in a group discussion you can reflect on, what does communion, the Lord's table, mean to you? You know, as you sit in a gathering and you have that bread and you have that cup, what is actually going on in your heart, in your mind? How is that drawing you closer to follow Jesus? Because, Jenny, I think it's a great way for us to have some symbolism that says, this is what Jesus actually did for me. And by partaking of that, I'm actually participating in receiving that gift of salvation that Jesus did on the cross. So,
You know, I think it's interesting because one of the things we've talked about throughout the series is that a gospel is written from the perspective of an eyewitness. And so I think it's so beautiful how Matthew's gospel tends to put, like, reason you should be disqualified from following Jesus right next to the moment when Jesus kind of gives you either healing or forgiveness or another chance. And so we've got Judas planning the betrayal, then Judas being called out amongst the people in the room. That's a small group of people that are together having this meal. And then right after that, Jesus foreshadows, I'm going to give my life for you.
Come on.
Remember this. And Judas is still there,
Still
right?
there.
It's like there's this like, did he leave right before that? Did he leave after that? Actually, we don't know from Matthew's perspective. There's different perspectives. And that's a fun thing to do is to go and read the different tellings of the Last Supper from the different perspectives in the Gospels. It's a fun thing to do. But Matthew actually tells the same story in that line of redemption with Peter.
Yeah.
And one fun thing, just a little Bible nerd moment, Matthew's like obsessed with Peter.
Yeah.
So the most Peter stories are in the Gospel of Matthew,
Yeah.
and they're good and bad,
Yeah,
right?
good, absolutely.
Peter is the one that walks on the water
Sure.
in Matthew's Gospel,
Yeah.
but in other Gospels, it's different parts of the story. So
Uh-huh.
that's just a fun little thing.
That's good.
But we've got this portion right after that conversation. It says that they sang a hymn and they went out on the Mount of Olives. And on the way, Jesus told them, "Tonight, all of you will desert me." And then there's this like back and forth conversation. And ultimately, Peter's like, "I will never desert you, Jesus."
Yeah.
And he says this famous line, "In fact, before the rooster crows on this very night,
Sure.
you will betray me 3 times.
Yeah.
Deny 3 times that you even know me."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's just so interesting because the very next scene that happens, and I love thinking about this like movie scenes, is they're praying in Gethsemane. And that's a really intimate moment
Yeah, for
where
sure.
there's just 3 of them there with Jesus. And then at that time is when Judas comes and brings the guard. And there's this whole altercation. So they're in Gethsemane, and then these guards come, and Peter, which we find out from another gospel, not in this gospel, but Peter actually takes the sword out, slashes a guy's ear off.
Yeah.
He's just like crazy angry about what's going on. And it's right after Jesus said, "You're going to deny you even know me." He's like, "Take this if I'm going to deny
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know me. I'm
I'm
going to
with
slash
you,
off the
Jesus.
guy's
Come
ear. I got
on.
my sword. Like, I'm
with
going
you,
after
Jesus.
this,
Yeah,
right?"
for sure.
And then right after that, Jesus is taken away, and Peter follows to the courtyard of the high priest. And
Yeah.
at that place is where he 3 times denies that he even knows
Wow.
Jesus.
Wow.
And then the rooster crows, and even in this gospel, it says that he remembered in that moment the words that Jesus said.
Yeah.
And I just think we've maybe all had that moment,
Sure.
like a rooster crow moment.
Absolutely.
Where like the deed is done, the thing has been done, and you realize this is who I always wanted to never be.
Sure.
And now I'm this person, or I have done this thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to me that Matthew's gospel doesn't actually tell the end of the story, but John's does. And so if you want to actually go back and do some extra credit homework, the end of the story of Peter's denial is that Jesus has a moment after he raises back from the dead to redeem Peter
Yeah.
and give him a new purpose and to
Yeah.
give him a new vision. And Peter almost has this renewed sense of understanding what it feels like to fail and then be redeemed. So John
Absolutely.
chapter 21, go check that out at some point. I think you'll really love hearing that part of the story. But yeah, so Peter denies Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus is in the hands of Pilate and the high priest under all these trials, and that thing that he said to Judas of, "You have said it,"
Uh-huh.
that's like becomes a theme that Jesus says over and over again.
Yeah.
You've said it,
Yeah,
you've said it,
so
you've
it
said
is.
it, you've
Yeah.
said it. And then what happens?
Then we actually see Jesus on the cross, the crucifixion. And you can, I think for me, Jen, as I think through the crucifixion and reading the Bible in a year, looking at how God always required some sort of a sacrifice for like the remission of sin to reestablish that covenant between he and mankind. I see that all come to at the forefront when we see Jesus on the cross. This moment where Jesus is being crucified as this sacrifice for humanity, that the new covenant is now being established, that now we're no longer bound by the law, but because of Jesus's crucifixion on the cross, we now have this entry into this grace that you and I get to freely receive. And there's tension in the cross, because when we see the cross, we see suffering, we see hurt, we see
Right.
pain, we see betrayal.
Yeah.
But we also see, as you so beautifully articulated, we see redemption, we see hope, we see glory, we see a next step that
good.
you and I can take in the crucifixion of Jesus, as he is this eternal sacrifice for us. And you mentioned kind of how some of the other gospels call some things out. In Luke's gospel, when we see this scene of the crucifixion, Jesus is in between 2 thieves. One of the thieves is saying, "Hey, if you're the Son of God, why don't you just save yourself and save us, and we'll all just be saved?" And
Yeah.
the other thief says, "Time out, wait a minute, we deserve what we're getting.
Right.
This man has done no wrong." And then he says, "Jesus, if you can you remember me when you get into your kingdom?" What a very powerful thing to tell Jesus. And Jesus responds, "I tell you the truth, today
Yeah.
you'll be with me in paradise." And so
Wow.
again, there's this contrast of despair and hope, light and darkness, and this freedom that comes from an event that would be so brutal, so broken, so hard, but it just opens the door for you and I to have this relationship with God in this new covenant that Jesus came to accomplish here on earth as God in the flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Wow.
some powerful stuff.
Well, and I find it interesting, and we didn't say this ahead of time, but I find it interesting that the thing that the Jews of this day that would have been waiting for the Messiah to do and to be would be to fulfill the nation of Israel, to liberate it from Roman rule. and Jesus is actually killed in a Roman execution.
Yeah, yeah.
So not only he's just saying, what if it has nothing to do with any of this?
Sure, absolutely.
Like, what if it has everything to do with the freedom and the redemption that I want to offer, with what the story has always been?
Yeah, for sure, from the beginning
With
of time.
the
Yeah,
whole
absolutely.
story, not
Absolutely,
just this
sure. Yeah.
this story, not this empires rise and fall,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And then there's this beautiful picture of Jesus who says that he's going to lay down his life for us.
Yeah.
It's fun to me how Matthew kind of calls out random people that maybe shouldn't be there in the story, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's just like a theme. It's just a fun one. One of them that we talked about before was this guy that carried Jesus' cross.
Yeah. Simon of Cyrene.
Simon of Cyrene's
Yeah.
like, what's that about?
Yeah, he carries his cross, and again, it speaks to kind of the turmoil that Jesus was in. How that cross was so heavy that they picked somebody randomly in the crowd to help Jesus carry his cross.
Wow.
Jesus also says earlier in the gospel, if you want to be my disciple. It's interesting. We see this scene that Matthew records, and then kind of the cost of discipleship that Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you must pick up your cross daily. Deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me.
Yeah.
And so as I see this man called out, I wonder if I was in that scene. I have to ask myself, Jenny, where is Ken carrying his cross?
Wow.
How am I dying to myself as I follow
That's a
Jesus?
good question.
Because I think all of us at some level, and you can talk about it in your groups, all of us at some level, we have a cross to carry,
Yeah.
a cross to bear, as my grandmother would say. And what does that look like as we follow Jesus on this journey, carrying the things that are heavy for us?
Well, I think it's also important to note that Simon wasn't crucified.
Yeah, sure.
Right,
Yeah.
Jesus was
Yeah.
crucified. So it's not that we have to sacrifice the way that Jesus did. Jesus already did that, and the
that's
sacrifice was enough.
That's good. Come on.
It's not about doing something to forgive myself, but it is about taking up my part that God's
Yeah.
asked me to play,
Yeah,
and to
come
do
on.
the thing that He's asked me to do, to
Come on.
aid in the mission.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
I love that He's getting him toward
Yeah.
the mission,
That's
the
really
ultimate
good.
mission there.
Yeah, on the mission with Jesus.
Love that.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
good
that.
stuff. Very
You know,
good.
another man that doesn't really belong is Joseph, a rich man from Arimathea who had been a follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body.
Yeah.
Goes and buries it in his own tomb, it says.
Yeah, for sure.
Like he valued Jesus so much that he took the tomb that was reserved for him and he gave it to Jesus. And I think
Wow.
this is so interesting to show, and this is where we'll end today, is the guard at the tomb, this last little section there in the text. And it's talking about how the religious leaders come and say, well, Jesus said that he was going to raise from the dead, so maybe the followers are going to like steal his body. So can we do something where like we post guards at the tomb so nobody can do anything crazy?
Yeah.
And it's this crazy, it's almost fear of revolution, which I think is what the whole thing is.
Sure, absolutely.
I once read this great statement that said that the crucifixion of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus was powerful because Jesus was God, but is also powerful because of who Jesus was to the religious system.
Oh, come on.
And so the fear that was put into this man who was God, who was crucified and then resurrected, they put guards at the tomb. They're like, this can't get out. This can't get out.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
everything we can do that this can't, we're going to
Sure.
silence him, silence the disciples, put a stone,
Sure.
put a guard. This can't get out. But we know that the story ends that this will get
Come
out
on.
and it will spread to the farthest reaches of the earth.
Wow. And what's so beautiful, thank you for saying that, because what's so beautiful about that message getting out of the good news, the gospel, it's a message that you and I get to be a part of today. And so this resurrection, this place in history, is not something that just, okay, Jesus raised from the dead, the message stopped. No, that's the very same mission that you and I are on
The
today.
message is getting out.
The message is still getting out. Yeah, that's
What'd be
powerful.
interesting to talk about in your groups is, maybe how has this moment changed your life?
Yeah.
How has this message made a difference in your life? And maybe who's someone this week that God is expecting you and asking you and kind of nudging you right now to let the message get out to?
Yeah.
And invite them to be with you at Easter this week.
Oh, good stuff. Hey, groups, have fun, and glad to be on the mission together.
Later,
We'll
guys.
see you next time.